Welcome into NFL Draft Daily. Happy Friday to you and yours. I'm Field Yates, joined by my guys, Jordan Reid and Matt Miller. Excited to have you here on Small School Fridays. We're going to dive into the prospects from some of the lesser-known schools that you need to know to get ready for the upcoming NFL Draft. And this matters because we have seen a number of all-time greats that came out of non-FBS schools. There's this guy, Jerry Rice, Mississippi Valley State. He's only one of the greatest players in NFL history. The Bears also drafted a guy named Walter Sweetness Payton out of Jackson State in 1975. He stands second on the NFL's all-time leading rushing list. Kutztown wideout Andre Reid earned 7 Pro Bowl selections and played in 4 straight Super Bowls for the Bills' run in the early 90s. What a great player he was. And after a strong career at Sonoma State, guard Larry Allen amassed 11 Pro Bowl nods in 14 seasons, was inducted into Canton in 2013. And finally, Michael Strahan was a second-round pick out of Texas Southern, playing all 15 years with the Giants. He was the Defensive Player of the Year in 2001, until just a couple of months ago, the single-season all-time sack leader. 4 years ago, there were 25 draft picks from non-FBS schools, but that number has dipped in recent years. There were 8 players from non-FBS schools selected in last year's draft, the fewest in a single draft since the 7-round format began back in 1994. Matt, probably the root of a lot of that is the NIL era that we are in, where players are poached from small schools to big schools. But for those that do stay at those smaller schools, what's the challenge from a scouting perspective in evaluating them?
Yeah, Field, I think it's just looking at the level of competition, and you mentioned it, the transfer portal has somewhat watered down the talent at this level, but there's still great players there, and the NFL will find you. The challenge is, what do you look like best versus best, which is why events like the East-West Shrine Game, the Senior Bowl, the NFL Scouting Combine, the Legacy Bowl, all these things are important because you want to get these small school players against legitimate NFL competition to see how they hold up. When I'm watching a small school guy on tape, you should be the best player, outstanding best player, on tape. That's how we know you'll stand out against, Power 4 type teams when you get to those opportunities. So I think as a small school guy, Jordan, what I'm always looking for is, are you just the easiest player on the field to see because the way that you stand out in terms of athleticism, production, technique, mechanics, and then it's an easy evaluation to understand, okay, this is a player that belongs at the next level.
All those are great points, Matt. And I point to one player that I think is a great example of that, and that's Quinyon Mitchell when he was coming out of Toledo. The one thing that scouts want to see with these small school prospects is domination. Are you able to dominate every single step of the process? Quinyon was able to do that his final season at Toledo. He went down to the Senior Bowl and had one of the best defensive performances that I have ever seen throughout all weeks of the Senior Bowl practices. And then he went to the Combine and he did everything. He ran a blazing low 4.3 40. He did everything outside of that. You see him going through the gauntlet drill as well. He caught every single ball. So him being able to dominate like that coming from a non-Power 4 school, that's why he ended up going in the back half of the first round.
The last thing that I would say to add on to what you guys have already said is there is probably a smaller tolerance for guys at small schools that don't check off the height, weight, or speed boxes, right? Because there's so many challenges that are facing them that if you're a little too small, a little too short, a little too slow, NFL teams a little bit less likely to have you prominently on their radar. But there will be some small school guys that will be on the NFL's radar at the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine, which kicks off on Monday as players begin arriving. Let's take a look back at last year's Combine when a small school standout, Zabel, the offensive lineman from North Dakota State, delivered an elite performance, which was highlighted by that 36.5-inch vertical. That's tied for the third best ever from an offensive lineman at the events. How much did it help him? He went 18th overall to the Seahawks, became a Super Bowl champion as a rookie. So let's dive into this year's Combine, Jordan, and give people a taste of some of the small school guys they need to know. Who's the first sleeper on your board?
It would be Caleb Proctor, the defensive lineman out of southeastern Louisiana. People think I'm talking about Caden Proctor, the offensive lineman. No, Caleb Proctor. If you turn on the tape from LSU, he was absolutely outstanding in that game. 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. You saw him pop up every single where. And in the Shrine Game, he definitely was one person that did stand out. And for teams that are looking for those quick penetrators up front, I definitely think he's going to be somebody that really interests teams more so in the 3rd or 4th round, Matt.
Yeah, you stole my guy, but I'll go with Nadame Tucker from Western Michigan, a Houston transfer this past year. 61 pressures, popped off the tip with 14.5 sacks and 21 tackles for a loss at 6'3", 250 pounds. We should see a pretty good workout from him next week when we get to Indy. But I think Tucker's somebody that could get into that top 100 with a good week, guys.
By the way, Caleb Proctor was also my pick for this. I'm going to go next to Charles Demings, though, from Stephen F. Austin, a cornerback who this past season had 4 interceptions. Big, long cover corner, plays with great confidence, certainly wants to be up in your face playing with man coverage. He was at the Senior Bowl just a few weeks ago, had a nice showing down there. Could hear his name called somewhere on day 3. Another combine prospect that we are watching is North Dakota State wide receiver Bryce Lance, and if he sounds like a familiar name, yes, he is the younger brother of former 3rd overall pick quarterback Trey Lance. So, Matt, of course, you do comps as well as anybody. Is there a player in the NFL whose game reminds you of Bryce Lance's?
Yeah, this was an easy one. Sometimes these comps are organic. You watch the player and you say, oh, that reminds me of this guy. But for me, it was Alec Pierce, who's set to be a free agent and will be very handsomely paid as a free agent in this NFL offseason. But it's the deep ball skills and then the vertical ability of Bryce Lance at 6'3", 200 pounds. He has the ability to carry defenses down the field. He high points well. He tracks the ball so well over either shoulder. You see him here, find the ball, spot the ball, and then he uses that speed to pull away from the defenders. He's adjusting so well, and then to have that strong ability to pluck the ball out of the air. That's what's made Alec Pierce such a good deep threat, such a good vertical asset for the Indianapolis Colts. And when I'm watching Lance, I see him easy as a transition as a number 3 receiver early in his NFL career, and someone that can stretch these teams, especially up the seam. But then it is the vertical ability as a jumper. I think we're going to see him over 40 inches in the vertical jump next week at the Combine. That shows up often in the red area where he uses not only the jumping ability, but the length as a 6'3" wide receiver to high point the ball, to be a threat in the red area. That is another asset. We saw Alec Pierce jump over 40 at his NFL Combine. I think we'll see similar numbers from Bryce Lance next week.
Jordan, I would argue that wide receiver is the deepest position in the entire draft this year. What are your thoughts on exactly or sort of where Bryce Lance, might wind up when we hear his name on April 24th or 5th, most likely?
I mean, it's really debatable as far as where he's going to go right now. And, guys, I think there's a huge cluster of those big X wide receivers right now. I think of Ted Hurst from Georgia State, Chris Brazile, the second out of Tennessee, and also Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame. Bryce Lance is right in that cluster with those guys of those big X receivers that can dominate down the field. But also, I think he's very underrated in the short to intermediate areas as well. Yes, he has great vertical speed, but also I think he's a really good route runner underneath as well. But as far as initially what he's going to bring to NFL teams, I think you're right, Matt. It's going to be that down the field dynamic, especially for teams that like to incorporate play action and then take those deep shots down the field. I think he definitely has a role there, especially early on in his rookie career.
My promise to America is that by the time we actually get to the draft, we will stop calling him Trey Lance on accident. They're brothers. I'm sure it's happened throughout the entirety of their life. Bryce Lance, an excellent wide receiver prospect, and he is going to flat out fly next week, the ESPN app. And time now for another edition of Real Talk, where we highlight some of the best reps that we have seen on film this draft season. If you don't know the name Cole Payton, get used to it. The quarterback from North Dakota State, who is an absolute freight train as a runner. He's got open field speed, and he has been a big play waiting to happen. Took a bunch of reps as a running back while he was waiting his turn to become North Dakota State's starter under center. And this past season, he made the most of his opportunities. And oh, by the way, he's an NFL rarity, Matt Miller. He's a left-handed quarterback. There's very few of those now in the league. Where do you see his stock right now after a pretty strong showing at the Senior Bowl?
I was going to say, I'm very intrigued by Cole Payton after the Senior Bowl. I think he has a shot early, day 3, because of that athletic ability. He was a Wildcat quarterback there. The comparisons to Taysom Hill are going to happen. We'll just get ahead of those right now. But he throws a beautiful, deep ball. It's not always the cleanest mechanically, guys, but beautiful in terms of placement, the arc on the ball, and giving his guys a chance to make plays. But I know Jordan and I, sitting together watching him in Mobile, pretty excited about the athletic ability that he brings.
Yeah, man, he's a player that's definitely grown on me over time. And I don't even think he has to take the Taysom Hill route. I definitely think he is a legit quarterback. So for teams that are saying he may have to take that route, I definitely think this guy's a legit quarterback that could go in the 3rd or the 4th round.
A lot of fun covering some of the players. It may not be from big schools, but have big game. For Jordan and Matt, I am Field. We'll see you guys again on Monday here in NFL Draft Daily, 3 Eastern on ESPN2.